The Panthers go back to back. Did the Leafs give them the hardest test? Should that mean anything? You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. What's happening, Dave? How are we feeling on a Wednesday?
Well, it's good to know that the Stanley Cup final's over, so we can full out get ourselves ready for that off-season chatter.
Yeah, we can. This
but
is true.
still feeling pretty gross.
Pretty gross. What are you feeling gross about?
Seeing the Panthers go back to back.
Oh, yeah. No. Yeah,
Hearing the word dynasty coming out of Matthew Tkachuk's mouth.
We're going to get into that, Dave. We're going to get into that conversation today because I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have. Before we do, let me just let you guys know that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. I was having a conversation with someone at the beginning of the Cup final. We were talking about playoff or Stanley Cup handoff bets on FanDuel, and someone said, maybe throw $5 on Nate Schmidt. And I said, there's no chance Nate Schmidt is going to get the first handoff from Alexander Barkov if they win the Cup. No shot whatsoever. Turns out it was, and that would have paid very handsomely. I think it was like a 20-1 bet or something like that. Probably even longer than that.
That person not only placed a bet, but bought a friggin' lottery ticket.
Yeah, exactly. But that's how it happened. The Florida Panthers went on to win the Stanley Cup in 6 games over the Edmonton Oilers. They won 5-1 against Edmonton on home ice, so it's nice. They got to celebrate in front of their fans on home ice for a second consecutive year, and that's now 2 Stanley Cups, 2 years in a row that they've won. That's 3 straight years that they have gone to the Cup final. And as you mentioned, Matt Tkachuk said in his interview after, he's like, 3 Cup finals in a row, 2 Stanley Cups. We've got to be a dynasty now. I kind of tend to think they are, Dave. Like the way that you came about it, do you disagree?
They got their butts handed to them in the first one. But I think, look, when you make it to 3, you can be put into the conversation. Winning, it's just also been proven that winning back to back. Although Bettman's like, it's almost seems like it's impossible. I'm like, I literally can recall the Panthers, the Lightning, the Penguins. It's happened before, Gary. It's not like
that's it, right? But that's
not common. I will say yes,
yeah.
It's not common, but let's hold on. It's almost impossible to have it happen.
Mm-hmm. The thing is, I look at this Florida team and I just look at the way that they kind of steamrolled through everybody. Like, honestly, they were the best team out there, right? They were the best team in the league last year, and they were again this year. And it's the hockey gods got it right by rewarding them with the Stanley Cup. I think for me, when I look at them, do I believe they're a dynasty? I do, because I don't think that it's over for the Florida Panthers. That's the thing. I still look at that group and I think, well, they're still fairly young. Like, a lot of their big pieces are only in their prime. Like, they're still in the, like, Barkov in his prime, Tkachuk in his prime, Reinhart prime, Ekblad prime. Like, a lot of these players, Verhaeghe prime, Gustav Forsling prime. Like, they're all right there. Bobrovsky, I guess, is the only one that you could look at and be like, that guy's kind of aging out. It's like, okay, but like, he's a goalie, right? Like, goaltenders, they can play a lot longer than most. So that's the only thing that I would say. Like, it's not over. So I think you could say it's the start of a dynasty for sure. I think you can absolutely say that. Now, if they, flame out and they never win another round, or they go, 3 years in a row after this by first round exit, okay, I think we'll look back and be like, maybe it wasn't a dynasty, but just a really good core, good group, good 3 years. but I don't think so. I think this is they're gonna be the team to beat again next year, right? And that's where I think that's where that word truly get thrown around. But like I look at this year's group in particular, I'm far more impressed with in which the way that they won a Stanley Cup this year compared to last year. Or even the way that they got to a cup final the year before that. Like, sure, they beat the Bruins. That was awesome. The way that they beat them after Boston had that unbelievable season, but then kind of steamrolled through the rest of the playoffs. And then they got, yes, beat by Vegas, but again, the Bobrovsky magic kind of faded, and Kachuk was seriously hurt, so he didn't even play there in the last couple games, and that was a big reason for that. But last year, you know, they make it all the way through. They're up 3-0. They almost gave it up, but they won in Game 7. But being able to do what they did this year, I think, was most impressive. To me, I felt that they were bigger, stronger, faster than any other team in the NHL, and they play with such great structure. They're dominant. They're physically imposing, and they play with just amazing structure. And I can't think of another team in the Cap era that has been able to do this as consistent and be as physically punishing as the Florida Panthers have been. And to me, that's why I think we'll always look at this group and this team and think like, man, that was a dynasty right there. What they're able to do for like, you know, a 2-3 year, possibly more span. No team in the Cap era, I think, has been as good as this currently constructed Florida team.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's just also just the way that every line play, like if you're a team in your own end, if you did not move that puck out of your own zone quickly, the Panthers forecheck was going to be right on top of you.
Yeah.
If you were not making a smart play with the puck, the Panthers were going to it was going to go against you. Right. And so like you look at the games that they won, especially in actually in majority of these games, like when they won, it was a statement victory. When they lost, not often did they get kind of blown out in any of their games. There were like a lot of close ones.
Thought I saw, I mean, granted, couple empty netters, but tonight was the 13th time on this playoff run that they had scored 5 or more goals. 13 times they scored 5+ goals in a playoff game. That's unheard of. Like, that does not happen in the modern NHL. It just doesn't. And the fact that they were able to do that, and, you know, we saw it here in Toronto, Game 5 and Game 7. They walloped them, put up more than 5 goals in each of those games, six spots in each of those games, realistically. And then tonight, another 5 spot they put up on the Edmonton Oilers to eliminate them and win the Stanley Cup, a convincing 5-1 win. And that 1 goal by Edmonton came when it was far too late. It was already 5-0 at that point when Podkolzin pounced on a rebound late to get 1. And there was no celebrating. They knew it was a losing cause anyways. They weren't going to win. And I don't know. I personally think that this is probably the greatest team of the Cap era. That's what I believe. That this is the greatest team of the Cap era. And, you know, to transition it into, you know, a conversation about the Leafs took them right to the bitter end. Like no other team was able to take this team to 7, right? This group this year. I mean, Tampa, they lost in, was it 5 games, I think, in Tampa? Carolina was 5 games. Edmonton was 6. Toronto's the only team that took them to 7 games. So I don't know if you can hang your hat on that if you're a Leaf fan or if you're the Maple Leafs franchise in general, that, yeah, they're the champs, they're the best, and they may be one of the best teams that we've seen, most dominant teams that we've seen of the Cap era. And Toronto's right there, 1 game away from besting them and beating them. Does that mean anything to you, Dave?
Not to me, not really, because of how games 5 and 7 went. Like they got outclassed in those 2 games. And to me, it's like, yeah, you took them to 7, but like that series should never gone to 7. Like it would have been more impressive again if the Leafs had actually won it, because they had their opportunities. Game 3, you're up 3-1. You lose that game, Florida gets their mojo back, and they take and then they go on and they win the series. So like, I was mad because it really did feel like if the Leafs had gone past Florida, the path was there. The path was there. But at the end of the day, when I see how the Leafs won their games and how the Panthers had won their games, the Panthers had a better kind of just the way that they went about winning those games was way more impressive than what the Leafs had done. And so to me, I don't buy into that. I don't think the Leafs were that close. Yes, 7 games was suggested, but to me, when you look at how that series was played, it wasn't as close, in my opinion.
So are you not impressed by what the Oilers did either? Like, are the Oilers in the same spot as the Leafs?
Similar. I think it's similar. Like, I think, look, yeah, like you can't be the team that's always looking to come back, right? And like we heard,
well, I'm just saying, you said game 5 and 7 is the reason for why, Florida.
I feel the same way about the Oilers because like
there was a 6-1 win by the Panthers, there was a 5-2 win by the Panthers, and a 5-1 win by the Panthers. So 3 of their 4 wins in this series came with 3 or more goals. A 3-win, a 3-goal win, a 4-goal win, and a 5-goal win in a 7-game series.
And what was the other problem with the Oilers had in this series? Who the heck were they going to start in goal? Like that to me is like also there were flaws with that Oilers team. And that's why I did not. Yes, it would have been nice to see the Oilers win with McDavid but Connor McDavid can't stop the pucks, right? There was just
no, but he could spend more time in the offensive zone to take less pressure, take off pressure from the goaltender, but he wasn't really able to do that either. No. And that's a lot of credit to Florida.
Yes. Okay. Here's another.
And that happened against Toronto, right? Like the Maple Leafs was the same formula, right? They made sure. How many times did we talk about the ozone time differential and how Toronto was playing in their own net on their own end the whole time?
Yeah.
That's because that's how Florida wins these games. The exact same thing to Edmonton. They forechecked the heck out of them, pressured them, turned pucks over, and then they were able to just control the zone, control the offensive zone, cycle it, get the puck up high, back down low. They won all these puck battles to keep possessions alive, right? Same exact thing against Toronto happened here against Edmonton. It's just what they do.
The Oilers led in this Stanley Cup final for 33-51. The Panthers 255 minutes.
That they led,
They led. That's to me like that makes it seem like it was not as close as it looked. The first period stats, Oilers outscored 9-0. The Panthers outshot them. Shot attempts were 103-68, and the Oilers save percentage 795. There's just too many critical areas where the Panthers were better.
Yep.
And that to me was the difference. Again, it's if you want to see where it went wrong, there's clear indications.
Yeah, there are, but flat out, the Panthers were the better team, right? They're the best team in the NHL, and they proved it all on the way. They deserved to win the Stanley Cup again, and they did it, right? That's what they had to do. That was their plan, their goal, and they accomplished that. And they're back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. But the problem is, Dave, this is a big reason for why we've had a lot of failures in Toronto, because now it's the Panthers who are in a dynasty. Before it was the Lightning that were in a dynasty. Are the Leafs just in an unlucky situation? Let's get into that conversation on the other side. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti, listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NHL playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it even easier to stay in the game before tip-off, and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Now that it's over, the Stanley Cup has been awarded. You can head over to FanDuel, and you can already make a wager on next year's Stanley Cup champion. You can make that wager on FanDuel. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. You head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Network. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues. Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti with you, as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get a podcast. And we're also up on YouTube. We are on our road to 10,000 subscribers. We are inching closer to 7K. Once we get to 10,000, we'll be giving away a Leafs jersey. So make sure that you're all subbed up and we can get ready to hand out one of those jerseys to one of our lucky listeners. All right, Dave. So that's 3 straight Stanley Cups, Cup finals for the Florida Panthers. They've won 2 of those 3 cups. And prior to this run by the Panthers, you had a dynasty-like run from the Tampa Bay Lightning, who did the exact same thing in a 3-year span. 3 straight cups with 3 straight cup finals with 2 Stanley Cups. So that's 6 years in a row that the Eastern Conference has been represented by one of the Florida teams, which also means they've been represented by the Atlantic Division. And a team that resides in the Atlantic Division happens to be the team that we cover here on a daily basis in the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, it's interesting. I don't want to sit here and make excuses for the team or try and take blame off of their shortcomings. But when you look back and you think about the last 6 years, right? The Matthews, Marner, Nylander, Tavares era, right? This core 4 era, they haven't gotten it done, right? That's so we keep saying they haven't got it done. It's also there's a lot of bad luck that's here, right? The fact that the Leafs finally figured it out and put together a team that could win, but it happened to be at the exact same time that they're building these beast teams out or down in Florida with Tampa and with the Panthers. And the Boston Bruins were also pretty darn good for the first half of that stretch at the very least. Literally won the President's Trophy, setting a record for most wins and points in a season. The Leafs just got so unlucky with the timing, I guess, for when this team got built, because we've always known that it's a good team, right? This has always been a good team. And it's just super unfortunate that once they figured it out and put together a quality squad, the rest of the division was just as difficult and put together even better squads.
Yeah, the Atlantic Division is no joke. And it's not, and it's going to continue to be good because even with Boston, going on their down, kind of taking a step back.
Maybe we'll see.
Right. But even like this season, Ottawa was much better. Right.
Yeah. You had in the playoffs.
How many, like all those, like how many teams made the playoffs from the Atlantic, right? And like the Metro, yeah, Washington was good, Carolina was decent, but like the Atlantic, top to bottom, was way better than than a lot of divisions I felt in the NHL, right? Even like, yeah, you look at the Panthers, they came in as the 3rd seed, but I mean, that's not a 3rd seed team. We knew that.
And like Kachuk didn't play the last quarter of the season. Ekblad missed 20 games. Marchand, he missed the first 3 weeks once he got there. So like they limped into the playoffs, but they didn't care because they knew what they could do. Like that's a team that knows how to flip a switch because they did. So it didn't matter for them. Whereas it seemed like for Toronto, winning the division meant a lot and felt psychologically like it would do something for the group. And it did. It allowed them to get Ottawa, who clearly, was a more, was a worse team than Tampa or Florida, who Toronto would have had to play if they didn't win the division, finish 2nd or 3rd. So it did help in that regard. But then it just meant that second round, they were still going to face one of those 2 teams. So to get through and make an actual run, they still were going to have to beat one of those two clubs. And clearly we know now that the Panthers, they're the best team in the NHL, and it would have been very difficult to do so. I think, the fact that Toronto took that thing to 7 proves that they are a good team. Now, how they lost game 7 is definitely disappointing,
Yeah.
but I think taking them there, I think they do deserve a little bit more credit than we're giving them, right?
Like,
Like
it's better than like 2 years ago when they got absolutely, shellacked in 5 games.
right. Well, 100%. But I just think like we've had these conversations, right? Should the Maple Leafs take a step back this year, right? Like that conversation happens on a daily basis, whether or not that's how they should go about this offseason. Because it sounds like Marner's leaving. Like he doesn't want to come back. So it sounds like he's out the door. Still up in the air. Tavares waiting on an extension or a contract, but it sounds like it's not going to be as team friendly as Leafs Nation wants it to be. So there's more of a conversation and negotiation to be had there. But there's, the discussion. Okay, well, there's not a lot out there. Like, should the Leafs just take a step back? And they're not that far off, right? They're not that far off. Like, is it really worth taking a step back? Like when they're that close, right? That close to being as good as a Florida or beating a Florida. Because think about it. This team at one point, they were up 2-0 on the Florida Panthers, up 2-0, 2-0, and had a 3-1 lead in game 3 and still somehow lost that series. But they had that big of an advantage on the Panthers, and then it all kind of went away. Obviously, we know what happened, and they completely puked on themselves and lost the game. But I think you look at game 6, and it's like when they play a certain way, when they play their game, they are just as good as Florida, or it's possible that they can compete with Florida at the very least. It's just whether or not they can do that consistently. They only showed a couple of times they were able to play that way. Certainly wasn't in game 5 or game 7, but game 6, I think you can hold on and look at that and be like, yeah, when they play a certain way, it's closer than it may appear. I think is how you can look at it. And I'm no longer in take a step back mode. Pretty much, I think is where I'm at over the course of these Cup finals. Seeing how I believe Toronto gave more of an effort and gave more of it was a more difficult opponent for Florida than Edmonton was. So to me, I think they should try to continue to go for it, not take a step back. That's what I think. They should try and go for it again next year, try and put together the best team they possibly can, and try and go forward, not backward.
To me, as long as you have Matthews in the fold, Nylander in the fold, it's hard to tell yourself to take a step back, right? Look at how much they have committed to a more veteran core, right, on that blue line. They're not in a position where they say, "Oh, let's take a step back." Like it doesn't benefit the team to do that. It benefits the team that doesn't have a lot of assets that they can trade or use to improve via trade,
Mm-hmm.
to just go out and just find a way. Now, I'm not saying you go out and you bring it all back, because
No, doesn't sound like that's a possibility, anyways.
No, but you have an opportunity to do things a little differently, but still keeping a good portion of what's made you successful together, right? Like, anybody think of the Leafs might be in a trouble to make the playoffs next year? Like, why would other than Marner leaving, what makes you people think that they're not going to make the playoffs? They're going to likely get a healthy Austin Matthews, which was a big problem
all year long. That was something that popped up in training camp, and he battled it all season.
Right? You have a potential to really improve your depth at forward. That should hopefully, if I'm Brad Living, how can I find ways to get more offense around the lineup and not putting the onus on the stars to do it all? That's something that can also help this team throughout the year to beat some of those, to be a better team. Your goaltending is still, yes, I know they don't have the Bobrovskis, Vasilevskis types, but it was pretty solid all year long, right? Maybe little blips here and there, but majority of the season, it was really good. It was a big strength of your team.
Stolar's put up better numbers than those two guys, realistically.
Yep. I just think that and it's also, you're looking at the division too. it's not like we'll see how the division works out and who, if any teams really do get better. But like Florida and Tampa, I think remain the only threat really to where the Leafs are in that top three. Like I
Yeah.
don't think unless the other teams make these massive moves to really improve, I don't. That's the other thing that truly I don't see how the Leafs take that far of a step back, because another team is gonna have to take a massive step forward to leapfrog them.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Someone would have to. And I don't really know if that team's out there yet, not in this division. Like I mean, I guess Tampa is still in that rank, but like if you look at those top three teams, right? Tampa, Florida, Toronto. I don't think Ottawa's quite there yet. I don't think Montreal's quite there yet. Detroit's not there, right? Buffalo clearly not there. So I still think that the Leafs, regardless, are one of the top three teams in that division and will finish with one of the top three teams of that division. And eventually they're going to end up in the exact same spot as they were this year. They got to beat at least one of those teams to make a run, right? Maybe two of those teams to make a run, most likely next year. So, yeah, it's going to be fascinating to see how the Maple Leafs go about the offseason. And I'll be curious if, like, if you ask Tree Living, hey, you've now had some time to process the loss to Florida, and after seeing kind of how the rest of the playoffs played out, knowing that you went the distance, the longest, you gave them the hardest trouble on the journey. Does that make you feel any differently about your squad? I'd love to know that. If you give him some truth serum, if he would have a different answer than he did, the day after being eliminated, right? So I don't think we're ever going to get that answer. However, or we certainly won't anytime soon. Maybe eventually, we could get that, but that's a question that I do wonder. All right, Dave. Speaking of Brad Treliving, I'm sure he's been busy, trying to wrangle in these still pending unrestricted free agents that the Maple Leafs had, not just Marner, obviously, but Tavares and many other guys. Denies contract still up for grabs. So lots for him to do. And they're already starting with their pro scout meetings. They're looking at free agency, which is now a couple weeks away till we get to July 1 free agency. So when we come back, Dave, we both have a dark horse free agent candidate. That's not one of the big boys that we think could be a good fit for the Toronto Maple Leafs. We'll unveil those players next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano, Dave Morassutti with you as always. The Maple Leafs have been in off-season mode for about a month now. It's been a few weeks at least. And about a month, yeah. And Dave, we haven't had a whole lot of news come out of Toronto. They haven't re-signed any of their pending free agents. There's been a lot of speculation on what's going on with the Maple Leafs and with Marner and Tavares and, whether or not Nyes is going to get a big contract and maybe a bridge deal, long-term deal, but nothing concrete has happened since then. I guess Lane Lambert left and they ended up replacing him. Who they replaced him with again? Why am I blanking?
Derek Lalonde.
Yeah, right. Derek Lalonde ended up replacing him behind the bench, but that's about it. And they also let Brendan Shanahan go. But that's about it. That's all that they've done to this point, concrete-wise, at the very least. But we expect for that to change now that the Cup final is behind us. Things should start to heat up. With the draft coming up and free agency not far afterward, things should really start to heat up around the league. And I think the Maple Leafs are going to be hot and heavy in those talks, whether it's the trade market, whether it's, talking free agency, potentially, trying to figure out, get themselves in position, find out who they want to target come free agency. And we've talked about, some of the big guns that are out there, the Sam Bennett's who just won Conn Smythe, the playoff MVP, and the runner-up to the Conn Smythe and Marchand. Will they be in on those two if both of them get to free agency? You've talked about Matt Duchene as a potential replacement for John Tavares if he doesn't re-sign here. So we've talked about some higher end players. Why don't we talk about some kind of dark horse free agent signings, some middle of the roster type of players that could potentially be good fits for the Maple Leafs. We both have one kind of dark horse free agent that we believe makes sense for Toronto. You want me to go first, or you want to go with yours first?
No, go ahead.
All right. So I'm pretty excited about this one. I'll be honest with you, but it's Andrew Mangiapane, who is coming off a down year. Don't get me wrong. Played last year. He got traded to the Washington Capitals. It didn't go very well for him. Just 14 goals, 28 points in 81 games. His time on ice dropped like 2.5 minutes from when he was in Calgary. Played just 13 minutes and 2 seconds on average this season. But we're talking about a guy who, when he was with Calgary, when he was with Brad Treliving, who drafted him in Calgary back in 2015, he had a career year with the Panthers, or with the Flames back in 21-22, 35 goal season, and that was under Daryl Sutter also. And look, Berube's got some Sutter in him. Like, those two are similar coaches. They have similar philosophies. So, and Andrew Mangiapane, I don't think he's a 35 goal guy every year. Like, that was kind of a one-off. He hasn't eclipsed 18 goals outside of that one season. So maybe he's only a 20 goal player, but he's a great two-way guy who could fit in your middle six. Again, we're looking for depth dark horses, because you look at what the Florida Panthers had all the way up and down their lineup, guys who could score, whether it was Evan Rodriguez, whether it was Marchand, whether it was Anton Lundell on the third line, right? Verhaeghe, on the second line, right? Like, they had guys all the way through their lineup scoring goals. And I think that's something that Toronto might need to look into, maybe adding some depth as opposed to relying on just, Matthews and Nylander to provide and score goals. And I think a guy like a Mangiapane could come in and fit into your middle six, and he's a great two-way player. He plays, well defensively and can chip in some offense here or there, right? So I think that's a player that there's a connection, obviously, with Brad Treliving, who drafted him, developed him, and saw him break out into a 35-goal star, back in 21-22. I think that there's a possibility that he could be a bit of a buy low candidate after 2 straight years where it kind of fell off a little bit. Like last year, he had 40 points, but just 14 goals. This year, just 14 goals, 28 points. But he did have 55 that year. He scored 35 goals. So there's a little bit of offense in there. He's 29 years old. So it's not as though, you want to be signing him to a long-term deal, because he's probably coming towards the end of his time and of his prime. But I think there's still probably a couple years left of pretty sound hockey. If you can get him in and around, like, the 3 to 4 million range, for a couple of seasons. I know that the Athletic gives him a market value of 3.5 million, projects his contract to be 3.8 million. So if you could get, 2 years at 7 million, let's say, at 3.5 each, you plug him into your middle six somewhere. I think that would work. So Andrew Mangiapane is my dark horse free agent that I like as a fit for Toronto.
Yeah, a couple things on Mangiapane. I've always been a big fan, like watching him at the World Championships for Canada.
Yeah.
Good contributor there.
I think that was the same year, 21-22. That was just a monstrous year for Mangiapane.
It was the year before, actually. It kind of felt like that World Championship catapulted. Right? Yeah. Like, he took that and went, like, he brought his game up. But I found a tweet from the playoffs that in round 1 for the Capitals, Mangiapane was the second best forward at creating offense at 5-on-5 behind Ovechkin.
Nice.
Like, in terms of getting offensive chances at 5-on-5, it was Ovechkin, Mangiapane, then Ryan Leonard, Connor McMichael, Dylan Strome. So there's something to be said about guys that can also manufacture offense. We know that's something that the Leafs have really struggled with.
Yeah.
And he can put the puck in the net too. And he doesn't have to be a top line player. Now, what hurt him, as you said, is his role changed when he got to Washington. He wasn't a bigger role in Calgary, and he's not necessarily going to be that going forward. But this is a guy, if you need someone to be bumped up in the lineup, I'd rather go with an Andrew Mangiapane in the top 6 than a Pontus Holmberg, right? Someone that can actually produce offense. So this is what we're talking about. Going and get a guy that you know can handle that role, not miscasting somebody. And hopefully, now I don't know if Mangiapane is going to provide the defensive part of the game. He used to be really good defensively, and maybe that's something he will get back in his game under Berube. I do think that True Living, maybe didn't even want to trade him. I don't even wait. Did he trade him?
No. He got traded this year. So he was traded like last summer. So he was traded by Craig Conroy.
So
he paid Mangiapane like $5 million a year. Like he gave him a nice contract.
So, that's also a good omen if you get a chance to bring someone that can be a productive player, and this is also a guy from Bolton. So maybe
there you go. Toronto kid.
Coming back to Toronto might also be something that appeases to Mangiapane.
And again, he may want to do like a 1 year, let me build my reputation back up, right? So he can come back and sign like, I don't know, 1 year, $3 million deal or something like that. Come into Toronto, play in the middle 6, and maybe you get lucky. You end up, you get put on a power play at some point, or on the second power play unit. You get some second power play time. Maybe you get put in the top 6 on a line with Nylander, and you just pick up cookies alongside William Nylander. He's got a good motor too. That's what I always really appreciate about Mangiapane, the motor that he plays with. It's not quite Zach Hyman-esque, but it's in the same ilk as a Hyman. So I think that Mangiapane is a solid player, a little undersized, so like that. But again, like he's a Tree Living guy, like drafted and developed and starred under Brad Treliving and under Daryl Sutter. So I have no issues with, although he's only 5'10", $185, no issues because he plays heavier than that, and he clearly, can succeed in that type of system and under that type of regime. Because he's done it before. I think he could do it again. So Mangiapane would be my kind of dark horse fit for the Maple Leafs. You got one in mind, Dave?
Yeah, I do.
You want to save it for tomorrow? I'm kind of running out of time, bit. Maybe we could save.
Yeah, save it for tomorrow because let's save it for tomorrow because I do want to have a conversation about this player.
Perfect.
So, let's save it.
All right, we'll save Dave's dark horse free agent for tomorrow's podcast. So make sure you come check out tomorrow's show and every show, Monday to Friday. The season's over, but the Locked On Leafs podcast is not. We're going all the way through till the end of the draft, through free agency, and all the way through the summer as well. Locked On Leafs 365. Make sure you're locked into us. That'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.